Hey everyone, it's NJ, and I'm glad you're back for day 3 of the His Stocking Advent Calendar. I'm having a lot of fun with this already, and I hope you are too. Today we're going to read a part of chapter 2. If you haven't listened to day 1 and day 2 of the Advent Calendar, I suggest that you go back and listen to those, or you're going to be lost. His Stocking, written and narrated by N.J. Cole. Chapter 2, Part 1. December had been a long month for Anthony. Contract negotiations had not gone well for one group of workers he oversaw, and there was a company that wasn't following guidelines. He feared he'd have to take them to court. He really didn't like drama, which was why he wasn't looking forward to the next week either. Christmas was about a week away, and while he wanted to spend it in his house on the lake just relaxing, first he had to attend some ridiculous meetings with people who had no clue what they were talking about. He hated when people who thought they knew everything butted into his business. He'd decided to stay at a hotel in Charleston for the 2 or 3 days of meetings because he didn't want to make the commute each day. He'd stopped at the hotel bar for a drink before heading up to his room to read up on the crazy woman he'd be meeting with in the morning. He wanted to be able to shut her down before she even got going. He knew her type. She'd be all riled up about some unreasonable thing he couldn't control with his company and demand a resolution he couldn't possibly offer when what she really needed was probably just to get laid. After finishing his shot of Crown with a beer chaser, he was about to head up to his room when a woman walked into the bar. She was wearing jeans and a sexy white sleeveless top. She looked to be his kind of woman, down to earth. "Pete," he said, calling to the bartender. "I'd like to buy that lady a drink." He knew Pete from the other meetings he'd had at this hotel. A minute later, Pete walked back with a shot of whiskey in his hand. "Lady says thank you, and she bought you this." Well, isn't she a firecracker? Anthony thought. He smirked, took the whiskey from Pete, and headed to the other end of the bar to thank her for the drink. The moment she spoke, he knew she was from up north. He enjoyed their conversation and their dancing even more. All he'd planned on was having a drink, and instead, he'd found the company of a beautiful woman. The situation couldn't have been more perfect. She was from out of town, and Anthony wasn't at all interested in a relationship. He appreciated the company of a woman in his bed as much as the next man, just not her clothes in his closet. Anthony hadn't gone into the bar looking for a hookup, and he hadn't even bought Bryn a drink hoping for one. But now, as the night wore down, his desire for her grew exponentially. He'd felt the chemistry when he'd held her in his arms as they danced, but when she looked up at him, as the last song played, he had such an intense desire to take her, he could barely contain himself. He had to say something before the night ended, and he regretted it for the rest of his life. "I really enjoyed spending this evening with you." "I did too," Bryn responded in a whisper. "I kinda don't want the night to end. Please forgive me for asking, but would you like to join me in my room?" There. It was out there like a balloon just floating in the air. Anthony nearly added, "Or we could go somewhere else," when Bryn responded, "I'd like that." He held her elbow as they left the bar. Pete winked at him, and he couldn't help but smile. This woman promised to make a great evening an even better night. The elevator ride was quick, and before he knew it, they were standing awkwardly in his room. "Can I get you a drink?" he asked, opening the small fridge in his room. He chuckled. "I have water or water?" Bryn giggled. "Water will be fine." He handed her the bottle, but she didn't open it, instead holding it in her hands, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Anthony liked that she was nervous. It meant that she didn't do this often. He took out his phone, and after a few clicks, jazz music played through the tiny speakers. "Would you like to dance again?" he asked quietly. Without a response, Bryn moved toward him and was once again in his arms. They danced for a short while before she looked up into his eyes. "You are so beautiful," he said, running the pad of his thumb over her lower lip. Bryn purred at the feeling. Anthony didn't hesitate on making his move. Bending his head, he brought his lips to hers. He kissed her lips softly before she parted them, allowing his tongue inside. He used it to caress her mouth, while his hands were doing the same to her lower back. With just a slight movement, he lowered them to cup her ass cheeks. She had a very nice ass, round and full. Gripping her cheeks, he pulled her tightly to him. Bryn moaned as she was caressed. Anthony knew she could feel his growing erection. How could she not? There was little room to spare in his jeans, and as he securely held her, there would be no doubt as to how excited he was. Anthony kissed his way across her jaw and down her neckline. He'd been teased by that shirt all night, and he wanted it off. Letting go of her ass, he tugged on the hem of the top and pulled it over her head. Bryn blushed slightly as he stood there admiring her body. She had on a white lacy bra that made her C-cups look spectacular. His fingers went to his own shirt, but her hand stopped him. "Let me do that for you, Anthony." She said it in a voice that made both his cock jump and his heart race. She made quick work of his buttons. He was pleased when she gasped at the sight of his chest. It was hairy. Quite hairy, actually. Bryn ran her fingers through his thick curls, feeling his muscles underneath. Her hands moved down until she reached the waistband of his jeans. While looking in his eyes, she removed first his belt, then undid the top button. She hesitated a moment. "Don't stop now, darling." But that's exactly where I'm going to stop today, everyone. Thanks for joining me for day 3 of Cole and His Stockings Advent Calendar. I'll see you tomorrow for the next part of Chapter 2.